All right, today we are starting a brand new series. I will finish the old one, right? I will finish the favorite aspects for each hero series once Rogue and Gambit get released. But I wanted to start another series, and I wanted to go into archetypes for each aspect of Marvel Champions. Now, this is a thing that's talked about a lot, right? Like general strategies and play styles for certain aspects and what to do and what not to do, whatever, whatever. I haven't really done this in the past, and I decided, maybe now's the time. Maybe I should. So, for this, I want to start with leadership, and I want to give 3 archetype examples. Now, this has kind of been done in the past, so to make it a little bit different, I'm going to I already have one, but I'm going to show you a deck that shows an example of this. Now, it's not like the end all be all deck. It's not like the best deck in the world, but it's a starting point for you if you want to try this out, right? And then you just tweak it based on the villain. So before we jump into this, do me a huge favor, like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. It really helps me out. And let's start with the very first one, which is Recursion. So Recursion, basically to bring allies back in, right? It is a pretty interesting build. It's pretty you'll get the idea right away pretty fast, which is what's kind of nice and easy about it. Also, you can use it with almost any hero. Will it'll work, right? Generally speaking, there might be a few that don't work great, but basically any hero. But it all starts really with this card, right? Which is Make the Call. Now, Make the Call is an event card which lets you pay the printed cost of an ally in any player's discard pile to put that ally into play under your control, which is an absolutely huge card, and basically how this whole thing works. So this is a very important card for that deck. Also, Rapid Response is another huge card. Also, I'll just point out, this is in the core set, just in case you're wondering. Another huge one is Rapid Response, which is a fantastic card. Basically, you're allowed max one per player, but you can put more in your deck, but you can only have one on the table at a time. After an ally you control is defeated, discard that, put that ally into play from your discard pile, and deal 1 damage to it, which is pretty huge. Now, the idea is, right, you're putting out allies, they're taking damage, and then they get discarded, and you can put them back in through Rapid Response or Make the Call. So, for example, Maria Hill is a great example of an ally you want to do this with, because after Maria Hill enters play, each player draws 1 card. This is fantastic in multiplayer, but it's a really good card for her in general. Now, you can't thwart again with her because you would have 1 damage if you did the whole Rapid Response thing, but allows you to draw a card after putting her back in from Rapid Response or from Make the Call. Either one will do it. Now, Nick Fury is another great one because not only is it expensive, but after Nick Fury enters play, you can draw 3 cards, right? So if you did a Rapid Response, put Nick Fury back in, you would get 3 cards for free, essentially, right? Which is great. Professor X is exactly the same, right? Where you're allowed to confuse the villain or stun a minion, or if you're playing an X-Men hero, you can ready up that X-Men, which is pretty useful, right? This is all really useful stuff, and this is kind of the idea of what you want to think about when you're recurring different allies in. Now, some people just want to recur an ally to put them in because they're cheap, and I get that too, because you just need an easy block. But generally speaking, these are some of the bigger cards you would probably be looking for. Now, I want to show you an example of what not to recur, and that is White Tiger. And the reason being is because it states White Tiger after you play White Tiger from your hand, right? So this is from your discard pile. This is also from your discard pile. So White Tiger would not work in this situation. Now, you can still put in White Tiger if you really want to, but the idea of this deck wouldn't do her response, right? It wouldn't draw her response, so it wouldn't be like as great. So anyway, I just want to show a quick example of what not to put in, but here's just a quick deck I built, and I'll put this deck and all the other decks down in the description so you can see it, so you don't have to try to copy and pause the video or anything like that. This is a very basic deck, right? I want to stress this. This isn't like the best deck in the world or anything like that. It's a very basic deck that I would throw together to do well with a Recursion build. And I like Captain America because it just seems thematic to me, that because especially on his alter ego side, you can reduce the cost of the first ally played each round by 1, which is pretty good. But then I just have a bunch of different allies that I think will work well with him. So, for example, after Black Panther enters play, again, you can recur him to enter play. It's not from your hands to enter play. Choose a leadership blue event in your discard pile attached to him face down. That event could be Make the Call, right? So if you played Black Panther the old-fashioned way, got Make the Call in, he got knocked out, you could use Make the Call to get him back in, or like a Rapid Response or whatever, right? You could do different things there, which I think is pretty interesting. But it's a good way to get Make the Calls back in. So if you get him on the table, you get Make the Call. You can use that Make the Call to get somebody else in, whatever you want to do, right? Somebody like Goliath I just like because it's an expensive, high cost or high attack card, which could be really good. Hawkeye I generally like in leadership a lot, just to worry about minions. Kalu is great because now you can search the top 5 cards of your deck for an event event, and this could include Make the Call or any of your events that you have, and add that to your hand, which is really helpful and nice. Again, Maria Hill, Nick Fury, Professor X, we all kind of talked about already of who we would use or who we bring in. Squirrel Girl, I also really like, because again, when she enters play, it's not from your hand. When she enters play, she deals 1 damage to each enemy. A good way to ping off damage really easy, and a good blocker. And then US Agent, I've always liked for retaliate and defending. Again, we have Make the Call. We have all of his cards. We have a bunch of resources. Command Team, I like just to ready up your allies and have them swing again, right? Black Panther is an example of this. You could bring him in. He could attack twice in a row and then come back on the table and Make the Call back in as well. Leadership training. This allows you to choose a leadership event in your discard pile and shuffle it back into your deck, right? You really need Make the Call back. You can do that. You can get that card back in to get other allies back in. Team Training, just give everyone a hit point, which is really nice. Just a really good card overall. I highly recommend in most of your leadership ally decks, this card should be in there. And then finally, Rapid Response. Again, you can only play one, max 1 per player, but you can have a bunch in your deck, right? So that's an example of what I would do for a Recursion deck on leadership. So the next thing I want to talk about is a Voltron deck, right? And the idea of a Voltron deck is pretty simple. Essentially, you are just making an ally really, really strong, right? Probably stronger than your hero. And what I want to talk about is the Vivian Hero Pack. Now, I know a lot of people think this is the Vision Hero Pack, but this is the Vivian Hero Pack. Don't let anyone confuse you. But I want to show you an example with her, right? So if we had Vision and we got Vivian at the table, how you would basically build her out and make her stronger, right? So something you could do is have R&D Facility, because you would be able to remove a counter from it and choose a friendly character in play. Vivian's a friendly character, and that character gets +1/+1 until the end of the phase. Now, Vivian, based on which form you are, gets +2 attack or +2 thwart. So she would already be at 3. So this could push her up to 4, right? As a support card, removing a counter from it. It has 3 uses. Team Training is always great. Again, I like it. I just want to really stress this because extra hit points are always really helpful. Leadership Skill is a newer card I really like. I think it's Storm this is in. When an ally makes a basic thwart or attack action, remove 1 leadership counter from here, that ally gets +1/+1 for that action, which is a pretty strong card, right? It's pretty good overall. Again, it is 1 max per player. Only has 3 uses, but I think it's a pretty decent card, to be honest. So it's definitely something I would look out for. And when you're thinking about this Voltron build, doing something with this. And Reinforced Suit, it's always great to add in extra health onto them. Now, there's different things you can do as well if they're an Avengers or they're Guardians, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But there is other things that you can do there to build them out a bit more. But that's kind of trait locked, which we'll get into. And another condition, I like this one too, attach ally gets +1/+1, which is huge for Vivian, because with just that card alone, she's either thwarting for 4 or attacking for 4 without anything else, which is kind of huge. So here's my Vision deck that I have built. That's just again a very basic example of this. I just have a couple of cheap allies in here. The big one is to put Vivian in. We have Make the Call because, again, you do, if something happens to her, you do want to get your build out character back in. So Make the Call is a good call. She has Reboot, which is also really important for her build, being able to ready up her and healing one. The other thing I want to note is that there are basic cards. I didn't put this in, so let me do it really fast. You could do a card like First Aid, which First Aid allows you to heal 2 damage from any character, right? So if you have a Voltron hero where you don't have a card like Reboot, because it only works for Android characters, and let's say you want to do it for Hawkeye or somebody, it doesn't matter who, you could use First Aid. It's a basic card, to work for anyone, to heal up Hawkeye by 2, which is kind of hard. Or not kind of hard, kind of good for you. There is also a leadership card like Get Ready or something like that, I think it's called, that lets you ready up your Get Ready. Lets you ready an ally. So it could, again, it kind of could do the same exact thing as what Reboot does. If you want to ready up your ally to use over and over, you could also throw in a Get Ready into this deck to really help it out and make it a bit stronger. Okay, so besides all the stuff on the left side, right side, we have Command Team, like I said, because we want to be able to ready our ally if need be. R&D Facility, I do like for giving that character +1/+1. Team Training, I generally like, again, for most things. Inspired is good, as we said. Leadership Skill, pretty good. Rapid response. I like this too because again, if your Voltron ally somehow gets knocked out, it's good to try to get them back in. Now you still have to build them out, right? You still have to go through that process again, but it's nice to be able to get those allies back in if need be and reinforce suit. So this is again a very basic version of how I would do this, and there are leadership cards out there that are trait locked for Avengers and Guardians, which we will get into in 1 second. But you kind of tweak the deck based on what you're working with. But I wanted to show an example that didn't use those traits because it's a little bit easier with those traits. So the last one that I want to talk about is, I don't know if there's really a term for it. I just call it trait building. And for example, I want to use the Guardians trait keyword, right? Whatever it is. I want to use that because Guardian trait, you can build around that and it can get pretty interesting, even in leadership. And Avengers does this pretty well too in leadership. So for example, you can use a card like Nowhere, right? Play only if your identity has the Guardian trait, increase your ally limit by 1, which is always great. After a player plays a Guardian ally, exhaust Nowhere, that player draws a card, right? Another example is team building exercise, right? Exhaust team building exercise, play a card from your hand that shares a trait with your hero, reducing its cost by 1, which is pretty cool, right? Because if you're going to build all around the Avengers trait, the Guardians trait, this is a pretty easy way to help lower the cost on a lot of things. We also have, for example, this is kind of an upgrade I was talking about with the Voltron build. If you use Guardians and you want to build out a Guardian character, you would use a card like this, where attached ally gets +1 thwart, +1 hit point. And then the other example of this is the attack version, right? It gets +1 attack and its attacks gain overkill, which is pretty cool. So to build this out, I used Star-Lord. Again, just an example. I like Star-Lord a lot, and I feel like I don't use him enough in leadership, and this is a deck I want to test out more and tweak depending on what villain I'm playing against. But I threw in some basic allies. I really like Adam Warlock for this build. Again, I think he's pretty good with being able to heal, choosing whether to choose damage or scheming or choosing what you want. I think it's like the opposite of Hulk, right? Hulk ally. Then we have Drax, Gamora, Groot, Ironheart, Maria Hill, Martin X, Nova Prime, Rocket Raccoon, and Squirrel Girl. Now, a lot of you may be wondering, why are there a lot of allies in there that aren't Guardian based? Well, Peter on his hero side states each ally you control gains the Guardian trait, right? So after you play that hero, they now become a Guardian, which triggers Nowhere, right? Because Nowhere is a response after a player plays a Guardian ally, which with Peter Quill is any of these allies, it doesn't matter which one, you can trigger Nowhere. So Nowhere is a really good card with him for triggering that kind of combo, which is really nice. We have his basic events, his resources, all that fun stuff. Again, I had team training in there, Triskelion, because I want to get more allies out there, because I want to get as many Guardian type allies out there. This is also kind of a play with this in the Recursion. You could do Ally Swarm build, right? I know we're not going to go into Ally Swarm, but it's kind of the same idea. You want to get a bunch of different allies out here. This is roughly in the same vein as an ally swarm build, like very, very roughly. But it gives you the same exact idea. Sit, CITT, I don't know how you pronounce it. You exhaust and spend 2 resources to ready a Guardian character, which is huge because it could be any of these, right? It can be any of them because they're all Guardian characters because each ally can trait, gains the Guardian trait. Again, and then we have excuse me, comms implant. We have a bunch of them and a bunch of laser blasters, again, because we can throw them onto anyone, because everyone is going to be a Guardian's ally. They all gain that trait. So again, that's a very basic example. You could do this with Avengers. You could do this with Web Warriors. You could do this with X-Men. I just want to do Guardians because I don't see a lot of Guardians builds out there. So anyway, that is just a really basic overview of 3, probably I would say pretty popular archetype builds in Marvel Champions. These are the ones you generally see the most. If you want to see other types of builds or different kinds, let me know down in the comments. If there's certain types you want to see, or if you just want to see me take certain cards and really build them out, right? Because you could use something like a Mighty Avengers card and really build around that particular card. That's a whole nother archetype that a lot of people don't even touch. It's just building around a card. It's not always the best strategy, but it can be a very powerful strategy. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully this was useful to you and this helps you out at all. Like I said, write me down in a comment if you want more videos like this. We will do the other aspects probably in a week or so. So we will be doing them. And while you're down writing that comment, make sure to hit like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Hit the join button if you're interested in helping out this channel, and I'll see you all next time.